This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, hello everyone. It is 1 o'clock on the East Coast, and we are going to go ahead and get started with our webinar today. My name is Jessica Enix, and I would like to welcome you to today's presentation, Essential Skills of Leadership. Before we begin our presentation, I'd like to review a few points of protocol so that you'll get the most out of your webinar experience. Remember, you are listening to the webinar via a conference service. If you are disconnected, repeat the steps that were given to you by the registration email. In order to reduce background noise, please be aware that all participant lines are muted throughout the webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat box on your screen. Our presenter will address questions at the conclusion of the presentation. Please note that today's program is being recorded. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Ms. Jamie Hasty. Jamie Hasty is a vice president with Susco Management Consultants in Richmond, Virginia. Jamie graduated from East Tennessee State University with a BBA in Human Resources Management. Jamie is a generalist consultant in all areas of human resource management with specialties in affirmative action, policy development, wage and hour accounting, employment regulation compliance, training and development, compensation and performance management systems, employee satisfaction assessments, executive screening and placement, and general human resources consulting. She regularly conducts management training for clients and serves as a guest speaker for state and national associations. Jamie is the certified trainer for Vital Learning Corporation, John Maxwell, and Susco Leadership Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Jamie Hasty.
Thank you, Jessica. And it's so good to be back with our valuable members today to talk all things about essential skills of leadership. As Jessica mentioned, I am going to be taking questions at the end of the session, so please feel free to use that chat feature. So really, in theory, I could probably spend days talking about leadership, and we only have an hour together. So we're going to talk kind of about the basics, the essentials, and then really areas that we can focus on either as individual leaders or as business owners of our respective organizations, especially when it gets down into some of the functional areas and the competency models there. So when I think about leadership, I think it's truly important to note that leadership is a choice. And there is a vast difference between being a leader as well as being a manager. And so Kuz and Posner really have a nice quote on this as it pertains to leadership, because when we're dealing with employees, whether they are our direct reports or maybe they're employees in a different department, and maybe you are serving as more of a lead or a mentor to them, leadership truly is a reciprocal relationship. As much as they are learning from me, I should be learning from them as well. And so when we talk about compliance, and trust me, I'm in HR, obviously, everything about compliance, policy, procedure, regulatory, those pieces, they're important. That's the management side of things, right? Them performing at an average of a 3 in the performance eval, that is a compliance piece. They're meeting expectations. But I really want us to get into the mindset of they're committing to us as people, as leaders within the organization, because we trust, we respect one another, and I am choosing to follow your lead. Okay. And so we're going to wear both hats every single day. You're going to wear the manager hat, you're going to wear the leader hat. And Sometimes one hat is being worn a little bit longer than the other, but a good manager, supervisor, director in an organization is really going to develop their competencies in a variety of areas. And they're going to look at both the leadership as well as the management skills. When are those required? When do we have to really kind of dig in our heels a little bit and focus on the compliance, the management piece, the productivity, the attendance, the quality metrics? Whereas the leadership side also has to be woven in on a daily basis with the soft skill, the communication, the approach, the mentorship, the delegation. All of these things are important. And so you have to demonstrate both on a daily basis, depending on what situation we are at in real time. Often you probably have heard me talk about communication being one of the number one issues in every organization. And I think what happens is when we really assume or embrace a leadership capacity, we learn to communicate in a way that inspires other people to act. And again, I could spend days talking about communication, but think about and tailoring our communication, whether that be in writing, in person, via a formal presentation, um, in a way that is meeting the audience's need and not necessarily what is easy and what is my own personal style. Because when we look at communication, I've got to take into consideration what's in it for them. What information do they want to know? What is important to encourage them to gain that buy-in, to get them excited about what I'm asking them to do so that when they go off to, process this customer concern, or maybe they're a project manager going to oversee a job site, um, we have to communicate in a way that is encouraging them to act. Jessica, can we get a line muted, please? Thank you. I appreciate that. Another way that managers really work to develop their leadership competencies is that we've got to always be thinking about succession planning, right? And not just succession planning when we're dealing with retirements or exit plans. Those things are important too. We should always have a good succession plan in place. But thinking about career pathing and really identifying those who show promise, who show drive, who show a desire to learn and grow, as many of our employees do, and kind of working with them, taking them underneath our wing if that becomes something that you can grow them in, or making the introduction and the networking situation to where I can align them with the right person to help grow and develop those current skill sets, but gain additional skill sets and abilities to meet the needs of the situation. So career pathing is incredibly important, especially as we're talking about our millennials and Gen Z. And it will be that much more important to those that follow in Gen Alpha. Okay. So we've got to, identify or peg, for lack of a better phrase, those people to take on more, to be independent, to, make good decisions. But again, that goes back to having good communication, good set expectations on the management side, but encouraging them to take on more. Which can tie into a variety of other areas, whether that's compensation or retention or morale and motivation. But more importantly, when they are assuming additional leadership pieces, whether that be a newly promoted supervisor or an employee that doesn't technically have any sort of formal leadership responsibilities, that we're giving them the support where they need it. Okay. And the last piece here is that good leaders will have a vision of what is possible. I've got a future slide on it. I call it the line of sight of the organization, but we've got to have a vision. But more importantly, we have to share that vision with other people, gain their input, gain their feedback so that they can buy into that vision. So let's talk a little bit about some competency clusters and those individual pieces and why they're important. But before we do that, let's hit the line of sight of the organization. So I do a lot of work with organizations nationwide in all industries. Some are small, independent laboratories or independent contractors in a variety of capacities. Others are very large, multi-location Fortune 100s. You name it, it's the full gamut. And what I find in almost every single organization when I'm coming in to assist with organizational development or to work with their leaders on some training and development aspects or compensation is that often the line of sight is very siloed. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense that we are solely focused on what our department, our division is doing. And sometimes we forget about how our action or inactions really do impact the other departments within the organization, which aligns with why we exist. So, one of the things that I do in leadership, especially when we're in person, um, and I really kind of push back a little bit on the leaders is I want every leader to really think about the nature of your organization. Why does your organization exist? Okay. And I don't mean the obvious reasons to provide a good or service and to make money. We know those things. But what are the other reasons why our organizations exist? Is it for innovation within the industry? Is it for cultivating skill sets within the workforce? Is it to give back to our communities? Is it about succession planning? There are other reasons in which our organization exists, on top of the fact that, yes, we're providing a good and a service for a profit, right? Those things are obvious. And so often when I work with leaders, I make them take a few minutes and take a step back and start plotting out things on a paper. Um, and sometimes they struggle with it, and that's a normal reaction. Why? Because I, as a leader, need to kind of really drill down to, okay, what is the reason why CESCO exists or ACIL or ASA exists? Like, what is our purpose here as an organization outside of the obvious? And so, really, as a leader, being able to identify those things is going to help with the line of sight of the organization. Why? Because those purposes are really, really important to weave into the line of sight of the organization. Here's where the train is at, here's where it's going, here's how quickly we're moving. And those purposes are important for our goals, our objectives, our vision, our mission, all of the things. But more importantly, I have to be able to communicate those items to the employees that are reporting to me, not just from a day-to-day operational perspective, but those things should also be part of the conversation when we're recruiting to fill open positions. They're important. That's what makes your organization unique. You know, here's something that's really important to us, giving back in the community. And that's one of our big purposes. And we do that on a monthly basis through X, Y, and Z. Those pieces really become part of our day-to-day lives, but also tie into that vision of where we're at and where we're headed. So the other thing is every organization will have a variety of titles, a variety of levels within the organization. And so you really have to be cognizant of the role of the supervisor in your organization. What is the reporting structure? What is the authority within that role? And for some, if we're really focusing on the technical and the managerial side, and again, there's no right or wrong there. But you have to understand, okay, that's the role. If I'm going to say my supervisors are only really going to focus on the management piece, not the soft skill, then we have to understand, accept that, and communicate that. But again, most of us are using both hats or wearing both hats on a day-to-day basis. So when I look at the role of a supervisor, most individuals whether it's in their current organization or in previous organizations throughout the course of their career, have risen up within the ranks, team lead, department manager, supervisor, director, whatever it may be, because they technically did their job well, right? They have the technical competencies. They know how the job is done. They have the area of expertise in that piece. They're able to be proficient, to hit numbers, to do quality work, to hold people accountable, right? And so we were focusing really and operating truly from a pure technical perspective. But as we become leaders within the organization, you've really got to shift that mindset and say, okay, the majority of my day is no longer spent on the technical competencies. The majority of my day is and may be focusing 95% on the soft skill, because I've trained down, I've mentored, I've grown, I've delegated, I've done all of these things. So you've got to really be comfortable and flesh out what is the role of the supervisor within your particular organization. And it's going to be different for every single one of us on this call. Okay. And the last piece, as it ties into the line of sight of the organization, is that we have to help others achieve results. At some point in our careers, somebody has mentored us. Could be formal mentor, could be informal mentor, but the moral of the story is they gave feedback, okay? And you may have had a supervisory mentor that was giving feedback on technical pieces of the job, but then you may have had somebody else that was talking about the bigger picture for you. When we do organizational opinion surveys, oftentimes, one of the low scoring categories nationwide is going to be in the feedback and recognition category. Okay. And when we dig deeper into those scores and we do the feedback meetings with individual departments, it is often brought to light that sure, I do hear feedback from my leader or my manager, but often that feedback is only tied to when I'm doing something wrong. Okay. So a leader is going to focus on identifying, observing, acknowledging the good as well as the bad, because, of course, we have to correct those pieces too. But really focusing on the good and the encouragement piece there, and constant, transparent communication to help others achieve results. As a leader, it's no longer about me. I am only as good as the team that I have. And if I am not giving myself to this team and teaching them what I know and learning from them as well, to where we're kind of a well-oiled machine, we're not going to achieve our results together as a department, but more importantly, as an organization. So these are three areas that I think are really, really important. So also another category to kind of flesh out throughout our leadership journey is really dealing with goal and action management. So 4 individual competencies here are going to be, obviously, a manager, a leader within the organization is going to have efficient orientations, right? So what are our policies, our procedures? What are our practices? What are the roles within our department? And are we efficient? Okay. How quickly am I getting people up to speed? And I don't mean rushing it, but I mean like truly being up to speed and competent in their roles. Depending on your industry, depending on the size of your organization, that may be much longer or much shorter for your respective positions. Another piece with goal and action management is we have to be proactive. Okay. Proactive to make things better, proactive to assist where we need to assist. And that leads me into being concerned with impact. Okay. Anytime we make a policy change, or anytime we roll out a project or something that is new or uncomfortable, a leader is going to focus on what impact may this have, not just for me as a leader, but for my department, other departments, and they're going to be concerned with that. And we're going to have open communications about that. And then last but not least, leaders are decisive. Okay. When we talk about employees choosing to follow us, it goes back to getting to know your people and having a foundation of trust and respect. Okay. But when I am a leader within the organization that flip-flops on things or can't or appears to not be able to make a decision, that's going to impact the confidence level that my team has in me as a leader. Now, let me take it to a different side of things. I have seen many a decisive leader make a decision, let's roll with it, whether that's a bad decision or it doesn't go as planned or what have you, and they don't acknowledge, well, here's what we learned from it, or you're right, it wasn't a great decision, so on and so forth. So it's one thing to be decisive, but we also have to be transparent in that goal and action management, to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. It may not work. It could blow up in our faces, or it may be the best thing that we've ever done. But you know what? We're going to figure it out together and let's try it. So it's all in how we approach, but then also follow up and address areas within that decisive action. Okay. Obviously, we have a functional and organizational leadership. So this has 5 individual competencies. And the first one is developing others. Okay. So one of the things that has come out for the last few years, post-pandemic, which still feels weird to say, is that all 4 generations that are currently in the workforce right now are really, really focused, and they ranked the same top 5 qualities. They've sorted them in different orders, so but they're all still the top 5. One of the areas was really about training and development. That was important to all 4 generations. So with organizational leadership, we've got to focus on, do we offer formal as well as informal training? Is there job shadowing? Is there mentorship? Is there exterior educational opportunities for certifications or additional education that can help me invest in my people, develop them within the organization, and then get my return on investment? Now, we could go off on a tangent and talk about how the workforce has shifted in terms of length of service with organizations, but we'll save that conversation for another day. So we have to always be thinking of, what can my potential gaps be, and how do I develop others within my department, my division, my building to fill those gaps. Okay. And then another area of organizational leadership is really that, because we have set good expectations and we have good transparent internal communications, that it's a group management skill set, right? Where we feel empowered to ask questions, we feel empowered to say, that doesn't seem right, without it becoming a, you're not my manager, don't talk to me that way. Okay, so there is a group management skill that also is identified in good organizational leadership. We have our functional marketing. Here's what we're doing. Here's where we're at. Here's what your role is. Think of it as more of internal marketing on ideas, processes, projects that we may be working on. And that helps us lead through the vision. You know, employees want to have a say in decisions that impact their job. So, you know, talking about an upcoming change to the best of our ability, giving people time to process, to think through that, talking about why that change is important and how that's going to impact X, Y, and Z, but it's getting us to A, B, and C goal, and kind of fleshing out all of those communications, all of those roles and responsibilities is important as well. And then we have to have integrity in everything that we do. Um, Making sure that we're not having sidebar conversations, that we are not finger pointing against other leaders within our department, division, building, that we are leading with integrity. We're being fair and consistent across the board so that nobody's going to question that I made an ethical or a solid choice. The next piece I think is really, really important is influence management. So with influence management, it's really about making sure that I'm being objective, that I'm gaining all of the facts and the circumstances ahead of time before I offer any sort of change, opinion, directive. Why? Because often in a world of instant gratification and or constant change and fires and movements within the organization, sometimes we make decisions with only limited facts. And that's going to happen. There's no way around that, right? But we also have to be objective. We have to think about what impacts might this have, what are the facts of the circumstances, not making it personal, not leading by emotion, and so that we're fair and consistent across the board, right? Another piece is still coalition and network building is really, really important. And especially within our respective professions, there are so many networking opportunities and individuals to connect with to build our little coalition. Because guess what? Maybe I do environmental lab work, but I need to tap into somebody that's doing chemical lab work to gain their feedback or education on an area. Maybe I am a newer contractor and I'm trying to get into federal contracts. So I'm going to reach out to another member where they may be able to share their experiences, their pros, their cons, their pain points in getting there. So all of that, those connections are so important as we manage and influence our team members, because knowledge is power. The other thing, obviously, is communication skills. Clear lines of communication. I often find that leaders are communicating to what they believe to be good communication, but it's the follow-up piece that often we can drop the ball on. So closing the gap, asking for clarification. If we notice flubs within products or services or the way in which they've handled a situation, how we address those things really, really matters. Not just why in the world would you have said that, or what were you thinking when you did X, Y, and Z, but just flipping the narrative and saying, help me understand. Or if it's still unclear, another key phrase that I really like in leadership and communication is tell me more. Okay. Those two phrases can really make a huge difference on influence management and the relationship that you have with your employees. And then influence is all about negotiation, right? So I want something done my way as the leader. Employees are saying, have you thought about this? And it becomes a negotiation, right? We meet somewhere in the middle. So that's part of influence management, is that the goal would be that all parties win. We know that's not always appropriate or the case, but there's going to need to be good negotiation skills that are done constructively as well to influence those employees to follow. With regard to business knowledge, obviously a competent leader needs to have business knowledge. They need to understand the industry. They need to understand the value add perspective of what everybody brings to the table. It's not uncommon now in some organizations where we may be hiring in without the specific experience in certain areas because their skill sets are portable. So we've got to look at the strategic focus. If we haven't done a strategic plan, I strongly encourage you to do one. Strategic plan typically nowadays is a 3-year plan. 5 years tends to be a little too long now in the workforce. But a strategic plan, and then tying that into the annual business plan and communicating that to your team so that they understand what's going on, what their role is in meeting these business objectives as well as the strategic focus for the next few years. And that helps us create an organizational awareness as well. Okay. And then obviously our technical proficiencies, our 5 basic principles of leadership, and then, general management skills, our supervisory skills, and computer tech skills there. So let's talk a little bit about the role of a team leader. So nobody wants to work for a quote unquote controller. There are organizations that still have a culture or a dynamic of micromanagement or control. And sure, you can do it, but you will see high turnover, you will see low morale, perhaps low productivity, because again, friendly reminder, morale and motivation are not synonymous. You can have low morale and high productivity or motivation, or vice versa. So we don't want to be in the frame of mind or have the relationship with our teams where I'm forcing or making people do their job. Sure, there are areas and times when I have to kind of lay the law down, for lack of a better phrase. But that's not typically the approach that most employees are going to respond to in a good way, right? Compliance is important, especially for many of us on this call that have not just employment compliance, but regulatory compliance from other areas based on the industry that we're in. So when we're focusing as a controller, we're merely just getting by at best. We really want to embrace that coach mentality by looking at how can I remove obstacles, roadblocks that are kind of tripping us up along the way, right? Work is hard, our business is important, but if there are roadblocks, we want to try to identify those, collaborate on how we can remove those, and make sure that we are showing commitment, not just to the business, but also to our employees. You got to get to know your team members, okay? What's important to them? What are their values? What is their end game plan? Because all of those things are going to help us tie back into motivation, which is going to impact our quality product there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about commitment. You can't buy commitment. Why? Because again, money is important, benefits are important, but you can toss all of the money in the world at somebody and they will merely only comply. Okay. Commitment comes from within. Okay. It comes from within and it's tied back into our internal needs and values. And so I often ask leaders to think about the best team member that they have. And they say, okay, I got it. I'm like, well, are they committed to you? And they say, well, absolutely. And I said, tell me why. Oh, well, they show up early, they stay late, they're always on top of things, they're asking me, how can I help? We have good open communication, all of these things, right? And that's because that leader and that team member have a foundation of relationship. I'm not suggesting that we have to be best friends with our teams, but you have to get to know your people. Otherwise, we can't tap into what's important to them and realign that or tie that into rather productivity and motivation there at work. Okay. So the team member is going to give a percentage plus a minimum percentage of the team leader, and that should be 100% of our decision. Okay. At minimum, the team leader should have majority decision-making power, of course, right? But again, everybody brings something very valuable to the table. So a good leader is going to be asking for input, feedback, on decisions. Not all decisions, but ones that make sense to include the team members on. Hey, we're thinking about changing this procurement policy or this procurement process. As somebody who does procurement, talk to me about kind of where you think some of our gaps may be, right? They may have great ideas. They may have ideas that we've tried before. Don't shoot the messenger and immediately shoot it down and say, we tried that, didn't work, too bad, so sad. Again, this goes back to communication and how we kind of address things. But they have to be involved in decisions that impact their day-to-day. If they are not, they will not commit to you. If they are not, they will simply only comply and do what is solely asked of them. And we want to get out of that model. Okay. So we also want to look at position power versus personal power. So really, do I as a leader have personal power? Okay. And I say that because often, or sometimes, I shouldn't say often, there are leaders within organizations that misuse their title. Okay. They're using that as position power. Well, I'm your manager, so you do what I say. Versus capitalizing on the personal power and the personal relationship to get that commitment, to get that communication being a two-way street versus the one-way. That's how we get quality. That's how we get good sharing of information from the top down, but also information from the bottom up, right? All too often, I think sometimes the decisions are made at the top, which is normal, and then pushed down. And sometimes the people that are at the decision-making table don't necessarily take into account the impact or the true day-to-day processes that the bottom is feeling and seeing. Whereas if they had communicated up as well, we would have met somewhere in the middle. Okay. So you got to involve them, and we have to trust people within reason. Okay. I'm doing some interim work right now, and we're working through a lot of organizational development issues. We've laid off one department, we've merged in two others together, and we're working through some of these things. And unfortunately, right now, as we work through those things, there is the fear. There is that position power and fear of, for some leaders in the organization, not all, of, I don't trust you, I don't know you, this is my way or the highway because I'm the manager. And so we're trying to really work and cultivate that leader to get out of that frame of mind. I understand you got burned by the other department who was all remote and not doing what they were supposed to be doing, which created a significant issue financially and operationally. But we can't focus on that moving forward because that's going to hinder our growth and our development and the employees that are still with us. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'm sure you all are very familiar with this, but obviously in order for me to, feel safe, I have to have my physiological needs met: food, water, shelter, etc. And then I feel safe. And once I feel safe, then I can work on social or relationship pieces, affiliating with friends, coworkers, peers. And that's once I have those items in place, then I have a good self-esteem about myself, right? So everybody is constantly moving up and down on this hierarchy of needs. But what sometimes we forget is that motivation solely comes from this hierarchy, 110%. Okay. So additionally, commitment comes from this chart. So if we are in physiological, safety, or social, they are solely going to be compliant. Compliant. They will do what you ask them to do. They will meet the expectation. They will not go above and beyond. When we go above and we have good self-esteem, we feel good about ourselves, we're motivated, our leader is tapping into what drives us internally. It could be social recognition, it may be task completion, it might be money, because money is driving the need for me to feel safe because I've sent my kid to college, whatever it may be. Once we get into the self-esteem piece, that's where the commitment occurs. Okay. So again, relationship. Let's talk a little bit about behavior versus attitude. So I often tell my folks in leadership training that you can never manage somebody's attitude. And it's the truth. You really can't. That attitude comes from a variety of ways because it's based on how somebody thinks or feels, right? What we can manage are the actual behaviors. So, did I see it? Did I hear it? And that is what a true leader does. They don't focus on perceptions or opinions or attitudes because we're going to just be spinning our tires. We're focused on facts versus opinions. Okay. So whether it's one-on-one communication, whether it is in a formal coaching situation, a performance evaluation, a separation of employment, everything should be specific and factual based and avoiding attitudes and opinions. Well, so here's a perfect example. Jamie, you consistently show up late for the last 3 meetings with ACIL and Jessica. I think it's because you don't value that relationship and you're not into it. You're not making it a priority. Well, the fact of that situation is I was late for the last 3 meetings. Okay. When we put our own spin, our attitudes, and our opinions on it, it's taking it out of context and we're not focusing on what is the true concern here. Okay. So always focus on the facts because they are neutral, whereas opinions can be positive or negative. Okay. Facts are behaviors, opinions are attitudes. Always work on that, and it helps reduce areas of misunderstanding and fussiness. Let's look at a few basic principles that I think are really, really important as well. First and foremost, always focus on the situation, issue, or behavior. Do not make it personal. Okay. That is the quickest way to deplete the relationship and the trust that you have worked so hard to build with a person. Always maintain the self-confidence and the self-esteem of others. A good leader will never throw somebody underneath the bus in public and or in private. Why? Because then that is going to get out, and that will also impact the self-confidence that people have in me to lead with integrity and ethics and consistency. Okay. The other piece is when you're providing that feedback, you always want to utilize the sandwich method. As old school as that may be, it works. Start with something positive, hit them with the facts, end on a positive note so that our conversation maintains the self-esteem of that individual as well. Also, you have to maintain constructive relationships with other people within the organization. That's another area that I'm working through with the client that I'm doing interim work on, is that there tends to be some infighting between the mid-level managers, and employees pick up on that. They're going to toe the line. If they hear you being not positive or supportive of another department or a decision, and we're saying, oh, well, I don't agree with this choice, but it is what it is. Guess we'll have to do it. You're undermining everything that we've worked so hard from a cultural perspective and from a relationship perspective to kind of be our day-to-day. So make sure that we, even though we may have disagreements and we may not always love each other and our coworkers, but we're maintaining those good constructive relationships. Obviously, take initiative to make things better where you can and lead by example. We have to walk the walk and talk the talk. So With motivation, I strongly encourage, if you've never done it before, I love personality profiles, particularly the DISC personality profile. It's not like a sales pitch, but it just happens to be the one I am most familiar with, and we utilize a lot at Sesco. And the reason why I like personality profiles is it gives me a look at what their natural tendencies are and helps me kind of determine how I'm going to ask for performance and drive that motivation. So asking for performance, there are people that are very relationship oriented first and task oriented second, and vice versa. So I'm going to use that knowledge to work it into what the performance expectations are, but also having good, clear, qualitative, quantitative performance expectations there, and having communicated those clearly. Okay. I'm also going to use a ton of positive reinforcement, and I'm going to personalize it. Now, the key here is you got to get to know your people, because some people love a ton of positive reinforcement. They like all of the social flair. Um, they like all of the accolades, and they want that in a more external environment. Okay. That's what's going to drive their motivation to keep producing, to keep performing, because, ooh, if I do this really well, then they may send out a department, email that says, "Great job, Jamie, I'm proud of you." Great. That's going to keep them motivated. However, not everybody is like that. Some people like more one-on-one, intimate, positive reinforcement. But regardless, it has to be personalized. Try to avoid saying, "Oh, good job," or thanks for helping out. Tell me specifically what I did well. Excuse me. And why that's important. Okay? Because that's going to keep building that relationship. Also, with motivation is asking for feedback and trying to understand our employees' point of view. This does not mean that you're going to always agree with their point of view, but allowing them to provide that point of view, that feedback to you. You may learn something, you may get additional information that you did not know immediately. And so that helps tap into that motivation as well. Model the type of behaviors that you want. If you want them to, be really high producing and, work together as a team, then you also have to work together with your team. And don't accept poor performance. I am still a huge proponent of 30, 60, 90-day evaluations, 6 months within the first year, and then annual thereafter. Set good, clear expectations, SMART goals, tangible, intangible things. Help them manage their goals, so that we're all on the same page and that we know we're all held to the same standards. 10 commandments of leadership that I think are important. Obviously, we always want to search for opportunities to grow, experiment within reason, to take some risks, to learn. We've talked about future and vision and collaboration. Those things are so important in leadership because it helps strengthen our relationships. Set good examples. Don't use an employee situation as an example. That would be an example of a controller situation. And help plan for that consistent progress, checkpoints, critical or crucial conversations, employee one-on-ones, check-ins are really, really important, as is celebrating those successes. We always want to reinforce the good so that those behaviors are repeated. And when we celebrate those successes, recognizing individual efforts again, but that's tying back into personalized, as well as how do they want to see those individual efforts recognized. Stephen Covey has written 7 Habits of Highly Effective Supervisors that still ring true today. Number 1, a good supervisor is going to communicate well and often. Sometimes I feel like we're just communicating. We feel like we're communicating so much and they're still not getting it. And when that happens, that can be a red flag to me as an HR individual and a consultant that perhaps we're not communicating in a way that's meaningful for the audience. So again, kind of challenge that process a little bit, what's working, what's not. And there are some things that are better communicated in person versus in writing. Flesh out those job performance expectations. Make sure you have good, solid job descriptions. And that those job descriptions are reflective upon the current job and how it's functioning. Number 3 would be that we make daily contact with as many employees as possible. It doesn't have to be formal contact. It could just be a, hey, good morning, Jessica. It's good to see you. How's your last week of school going for the kids? Or it could be a, hey, you have 5 minutes. I'd like to just check in. How's this week going? What is your high and what is your low? What do you need from me as your supervisor? Those things are really important to help continue to foster that relationship. Loosen the reins where we can. Let them make decisions. Let them succeed. Let them fail within reason, and help them pick up the pieces when we do stumble. Have to have good sense of humor. Give good direction and consistency. What you do for one, you need to do for them all. Even though we're not supposed to have favorites, I know sometimes we still do. So we need to be mindful of favoritism and look for ways that you can learn from your team. We may not always have the answers, and that's okay. I think a lot of times a good supervisor is going to acknowledge that. Hey, I don't have all of the answers. You may have more information than I do on this particular area, and I'd love to learn about it. So I think that vulnerability is also important. 7 C's, inside and out, for motivation: courtesy, showing concern for our employees, giving them consideration of factors that may be playing into life, because life is hard. Always demonstrating compassion for our team members. Doesn't mean that they're going to get a full slide or out of something, but we can still be compassionate, be consistent, be in control, but also demonstrate a caring situation as well. So in summary, we want to have good leadership skills so that our team members give their best, because we all win. When we're all on the same page, we're all winning. And I can't do my job without my team members to meet the needs of the organization. So we want to be in this together. Always maintain that self-esteem. That's really a critical skill out of those 5 basic principles. So focus on good behavior. It's the only way we can manage performance. We can discuss those things objectively and factually and kind of work through areas of opportunity, and try to involve our employees in decision-making, feedback, because that can be a true motivating tool as well. Encourage their participation, get to know them, get to know what's important to them, and then you can kind of weave that into how you maintain their motivation. Okay. I know I threw a lot at you in about 55 minutes. So Jessica, I am going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat in case there are any questions. If there are questions, please feel free to utilize that chat feature. While we wait on that, I do want to let you know I will provide Jessica a copy of the PowerPoint, and she can get that out to you sometime after our session today.
Thank you very much, Jamie, for your presentation. I know we're waiting for some questions to come in. That was the first question as far as a PDF of the slide deck. So everyone, we will get that up on the website by tomorrow.
Okay.
So we'll give everybody just a couple more minutes to type in any questions you have. Again, the chat icon is located at the top right-hand side of your screen. So just type any questions you have for Jamie in there.
Yeah, thank you. And also, friendly reminder, as members, you all have telephone and email access to Sesco for HR related questions, HR related needs. Hey, I got this weird situation. Can I just bounce some ideas off of you? Feel free to please utilize that member benefit. It's so, so valuable.
Okay. I am not seeing any questions at this point. So, Jamie, I'm assuming that you have answered everybody's questions today.
Oh, well, thank you. Oh, wait.
We do have one.
Can I speak about empowering teams so they can drive their own success? That's a great question. I mean, again, I think you have to go back to the foundations. If we don't know what our goals and objectives are, I'm not going to be able to empower my team. The other piece is you have to look at each individual on that team and what their unique personality style is going to be, and then be able to communicate and cultivate that relationship and explain the why behind things in order for them to feel empowered to do what you're asking them to do. Not everybody is driven the way or wired the way in which we are. I was talking to a client not too long ago last week, and they were like, gosh, I work, I'm just like a workhorse. I'm going to knock it out and I'll work until 7 o'clock at night. And I said, yes, that's how you are wired because that drives your motivation. However, we can't project that individual empowerment or drive onto our coworkers because not everybody's going to have that. Not everybody wants to take on additional tasks. Not everybody wants to grow and develop. But it's about having those meaningful one-on-one conversations to figure out what is something that's interesting to them or that is important to them and what they view as quote unquote success, so that we can help kind of guide them through that. That's really the initial piece. And then you can work to kind of empower and reinforce. They almost need a little taste of it first. Some people will take it and run with it and be just fine, and others are going to be slower to embrace that empowerment. So that's a good question, Craig. Are there any other questions that I might be able to answer for you all? Be more than happy. Or you can always reach out to us and we can talk offline if you'd rather do one-on-one. More than happy to do that as well.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, Jamie, for your presentation. Thank you all for joining us today, and we will look forward to everyone joining us on our next webinar. Everybody have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.